Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. 2021 Subaru WRX STI, here's what it's like to live with.
Alright guys, so you're thinking about getting a Subaru WRX STI. You've lusted after the WRX since high school, you've been working your first big boy job at a young age, you probably considered getting an M3 but your boss drives one, you probably can't afford it new, so here's what you have. So you can't afford the new M3 at $70,000 to $90,000. How about used? Well, finding a used M3 in the 40s might be a little bit rough. You'll probably be the fourth owner, the car will have 60+ thousand miles, it might have been modified, and you'll be out of pocket with repairs. So like me, you want something newer with a warranty, something that's been one of your Japanese dream cars for the longest time. You want something that's a little bit more edgy. You know, you have a Japanese rally car that can drive in snow, mud, gravel, and rain, something that can do it all, especially while holding its value since they aren't making it anymore. You know, you want a car that does both the practical side and the fun times. You don't have space for a fun secondary car, so you get a car that does it all. Here's a Subaru WRX STI, a family, rally-inspired sedan that you may use 90% of the time for work. Do I think it's worth it? Ultimately, it really depends on where you live. You know, if you live in poor climates like the Midwest or wet conditions like the Bay Area, 10 out of 10 would recommend. This car just gives so much confidence and safety. You know, you get to push the car near its limits despite whatever climate you're in, whether it be snow or pouring rain. If these conditions are your typical commute to work, I would highly recommend. You know, what other alternatives do you have out there these days? Alright, yes, there's a GR Corolla, but those things are going for near $60,000 after markup. Then you have the new WRX, which honestly, not really my jam, but I still love it for what it is. I'm glad Subaru is still making it. Okay, how about the new Civic Type R, Integra Type S, or even a Elantra? And what if you just threw winter or proper tires on it? I'm pretty sure it's capable, but in snow or wet conditions, since it's front wheel drive, you're still more at risk for understeering. And imagine if you just threw those same tires on something like this, how much more capable it would be. Plus the ground clearance on the stock height is quite good. Getting into this car feels like a fishbowl. You know, you have so much visibility, so much space, it feels so open. The front and rear seat passengers have tons of room for activities. The seats aren't super fatiguing. You know, I often take this car on 6-hour round-trip road trips. My commute to work can sometimes range from 20 to 45 minutes, and if you're younger, without back pain like me, It's actually doable. You know, this is actually a quite comfortable space to be in. Alright, so that's enough about the interior. What's it like actually driving to work? So you're on your way to work. The coffee is still working its way into your brain. It's day 4 to 5, maybe you're too tired mentally to be driving a manual sports sedan. While getting in the car doesn't require you to duck your head and fall into a seat like a normal sports car, the clutch is quite forgiving, has a nice feel, weight, and travel. It's way easier than the 350 or Mustang clutch. The gearbox takes a little bit of time to warm up, but afterwards it's smooth and direct, and once you're actually driving the car, it's way quicker than maybe 70% of the other cars on the road. You know, working on the weekends is a pain, but driving something like this on a Sunday morning without any traffic is a dream. This car wakes you up, it primes the caffeine that's working its way into your head. Even with the stock exhaust, you get to enjoy some of that iconic boxer rumble. You even hear a very faint whooshing noise in between shifts. The car handles highway ramps like a champ, despite whatever climate you're in. If you're leaving early enough before your shift, these roads kind of turn into your imaginary racetrack. And since it's only 300 horsepower, you know, which is still faster than majority of the cars on the road, you're not going jail speeds when you're trying to have fun with the car. Now, if you're leaving during rush hour, this car, being a manual, requires more thinking and effort than I would like. If when you're bumper to bumper, driving through the city, through all of its construction, I would much rather be in an automatic. That's another thing to consider when buying, you know, what does your typical commute look like? Is it straight roads with endless traffic into the city, with construction cones popping up every day like weeds? If that's the case, I probably wouldn't recommend this car as a daily, mainly because of it being a manual. This being my daily out of the 3 cars, I actually wish Subaru made this car in some DCT, like the Evo. But actually, if your route to work is endless open roads, maybe some front turns and interesting views in between, if you get to leave early enough to avoid traffic and use these cones as your imaginary autocross track, if you can actually turn your commute to an event, I would highly recommend getting a sports sedan as your daily driver. Okay, next let's talk about the trunk space. The trunk space in this thing is actually quite usable. For me, I don't lug tons of gear, but look at all of this extra space. You know, if your job doesn't require you to have an SUV or a truck to lug your equipment, you should consider this because the trunk space in this as a sedan is pretty unbeatable in my opinion. You know, you have this large opening, you have a nice depth with seats being a 60-40 fold downs, and you get all the space to lug whatever gear you have. The road noise in this car is a little bit loud. Maybe it's my worn tires, or maybe it's the fact that you have 19-inch wheels with skinny sidewalls and a track-tuned suspension. You know, the road noise on the highway can actually be louder than an OEM exhaust. This is why I keep going back and forth with getting exhaust. This OEM doesn't offer much of that iconic rumble experience, but also I don't want to deal with both road noise and drone. So if you have any recommendations or experience, please let me know down in the comments. You know, even though the road noise is bad, the ride comfort is actually not as bad as I would imagine. You know, it takes bumps pretty well, it's not as harsh when driving over dips, and the interior as of now has 0 rattles. The seats are pretty comfortable. Again, I'm able to drive 8 hours straight in this thing. I could probably comfortably do 4 hours straight before I start wishing my car had massaging seats. But here's the little things that I appreciate the most. You have CarPlay and a handsome interior. Everything is laid out neatly. You have physical buttons. You get Subaru's best simple infotainment before they went to the giant iPads, which will soon become dated. All I really need is CarPlay. This is great to have if you sometimes commuting to unfamiliar locations for work. I float for my job, and if I haven't been to the site in a while, it's nice to have this feature in your sports car. Also, having heated seats but not a wheel, which probably is my only gripe as a winter car. Anyways, you make it to work. Here's my main gripe about the car other than its reliability scares. As a daily driver with a mix of freeway and city driving, you're averaging probably like 18 to 21 miles per gallon in a turbo 4-cylinder, 3,400 pound family sedan. You know, this is still better than your average 4Runner, but still getting the same miles per gallon as a modern SUV that weighs triple with probably a V6 V8 setup. It's an outdated engine for sure, but I just wish I had an extra 5 miles per gallon so I wouldn't have to fill every week, even though I only work 3 to 4 days. You know, but other than that, I enjoyed my drive to work, the caffeine's kicked in, and I'm ready to work the next 10 to 12 hours of torture. Alright, so you finished a hard day's worth of work, you made all that money so you can afford this Japanese dream car that you've been lusting after since high school. Do I think it's worth it? My workday is normally 10 to 12 hour shifts. I'm a PA in the emergency room, so every day I talk to people non-stop, and as an introvert, it's going to be socially and just mentally exhausting. So sometimes your drive home from work can be tiring itself. Do you really have the energy to have fun with this Japanese rally-inspired sports sedan? Well, it all really depends. I mean, for me, my drives home from work can be the most peaceful escapes I have during the week. You know, I get off late, typically after 10 p.m., so the open roads to yourself, the quietness inside the cabin, and just hearing the car as you roll through its gears can be extremely therapeutic. But you know, it's not really all fun and games. If I'm on day 3 or 4 of these 12-hour shifts and I had an extremely rough day, sometimes I don't think it's worth it. Sometimes I'm just too tired to be having fun, and the thought of changing gears, the thought of riding in this track-tuned suspension, sometimes I want something just a little bit more comfortable on my drive back, and you know, if I had a really extremely difficult day at work, sometimes I even consider getting rid of all these toys to have something more comfortable, like a Tesla or Cadillac Lyriq, something I don't have to think about. You know, sometimes you're just not in the mood to have fun. I mean, maybe if I had like a 911 or a Huracan, that can probably override all of these depressing thoughts, but I can only imagine because I can't afford it. But otherwise, despite that depressing rant, for me, I would say 80% of the time this car brings me the most peace during my drive back home from work. And to me, that's kind of what I value the most. If it's my Friday, then I'm 100% ripping this car hard onto the highway ramps, going acceptable speeds. Again, this car handles like a dream. The gearbox and the transmission is smooth and bulletproof. And I know, hiding behind this OEM exhaust, this thing has probably one of the best sounding 4-cylinder motors. So driving it at night too looks so cool. This thing looks like modern Gundam. For me, driving the Subaru STI from work is one of the most rewarding, most therapeutic drives I have out of the 3. I have the S2000, but sometimes that's a little bit too raw, and the 370 with the automatic isn't as engaging. And that 370 Nismo already gave me 2 tickets, so sometimes it's a little bit too fast. So at the end of the day, ultimately it depends on your situation, probably your climate condition. You know, do you have to commute to work, and how often is that? Other things to think about, you know, do you typically leave work feeling so burnt out, like too burnt out to even have fun? Is the route home from work even worth driving fun? Like, are you driving out of the city with endless traffic and steep hills? You know, does your job require heavy labor that wears on your body? Because driving in this car, the ride can be stiff, it requires you to change your own gears. You know, what if your legs are sore? And lastly, you know, would you even benefit having this all-wheel drive system? You know, do you see this car protecting you from the worst climates on your way home? You know, these are all things to consider, and you know, for me in my situation, I think it's 100% doable and worth it. I'm normally working 3 or 4 days in the week, so less drives in general. My commute to work can be variable. It's mostly freeway, so having a manual isn't as bad. And you know, Vegas rains can get quite heavy. You know, you have heavy floods, slippery surface, so this car has actually saved me a few times during our monsoon season. You know, if I was tired driving some rural drive sports car and it was pouring, I would 100% 360 off the road. The safety in this car in general is so underrated in my opinion. Like I said, if it's my Friday, driving this rally sports car home is 100 times more enjoyable and therapeutic versus me taking it out on a back road. that's 90% of what this car actually serves. You know, I don't live on the track, I'm not rallying this thing off hills. I drive this thing to ski resorts maybe 2 to 3 times in the year. Probably a bit overkill to have this thing, but you know, like I said, just having a sports sedan that does both your work and fun needs, you know, being able to share this experience with your family and your friends. This thing probably isn't the most raw and engaging, you know, it's not the fastest or coolest looking, but in my opinion, it kind of strikes a perfect balance between all of those things. And you know, most importantly, driving this thing home on a Friday night brings me the most peace throughout the week, and to me, that's just what I value the most. Being able to drive one of your high school dream cars home from your dream job, you know, honestly, nothing beats this feeling. I know it's just a Subaru, it only has 300 something horsepower, your friend's straight piped Infiniti or V6 Camaro could 100% smoke this thing, but you know, despite all of that, after 2 years, I still love this thing. I love its styling, the boxer rumble, the transmission and the gearbox, the high grip suspension, the comfortable and usable interior. I love the capability of this thing, and the fact that I can feel confident ripping this thing through whatever climate you're in. It always gets you back home safely without spinning out. I don't love the reliability, but that's another topic. But overall, I just love this car for what it is, and the fact that they aren't making these things anymore makes me want to hold on to it for as long as possible. But anyways, I'm gonna wrap it up with this video. You know, I hope I provided you some insight, not only with the Subaru STI, but you know, having a sports car as daily in general. You know, let me know what you think, what your experience is, what would you rather take. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, hope you learned something. I'll see you guys in the next one. Enjoy the ride back.